Yes, good morning, board members, staff, and community members and guests, and welcome to this April 4th Brown Bag. I'd like to introduce Ms. Janice Hernandez, who's going to lead us in our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiances, please.
Almighty God, allow us to collectively bring reflection and wisdom to our meeting. May we use our expertise and our judgment to contribute to the well-being of our students and the families that we serve. May we be listeners more than speakers, and may we always have in mind your will for the future of our district. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
All right, the first thing we have on the agenda is the property.
Yes, sir. This is in reference to the 1.562 acres right here off 11787 Dragon Lane. This year has negotiated a price at $104,757,000, and this is a district fund balance funded purchase. On your desk there on top, you have the actual plot that we looked at last time. So you see it's squared off in red. The property that we're looking to purchase is the property that's highlighted in yellow. We actually had it surveyed to leave the purchase owner a portion so that they could live off, and because of septic issues we had to go back and get a survey. So that has been done and completed. We're still working on the environmental. It should be done by the end of this week. But we're coming to the board to move forward to make this purchase. So there's a motion that needs to be read.
Do we have a question?
No,
Yeah,
sir.
I would like for you to explain just in general why we're buying that property.
Well, the TxDOT is coming down 1604 towards Southwest High School, and by the year 2020, the TxDOT would basically create a 4-lane area from 1604, which is 90, which you see there's completion there all the way up to 35. And the idea is that they're going to take Pearsall Road and build an overpass similar to Marbach. By doing that, we have the opportunity to rearrange and have a new entrance to Southwest High School that would come through the arches. And the two pieces of property that the district did not own, that's the reason why we're making those purchases, is the area that we would need to go through to make that happen. And that would allow us to close off the front road that goes out to 1604, and maybe later on extend the parking lot from in front of Southwest High School. So there's a bunch of possibilities. And at the same time, as TxDOT come in, we can work with TxDOT to help alleviate some of the cost of hopefully building this road through.
Yeah.
So we're going to be working with them.
And ultimately, because of what Mr. Crisp just described, it's going to cease our students walking between cars every afternoon at 4 o'clock. So we're trying to avoid any unregrettable accidents, and this is going to provide that opportunity.
Yeah, this is a real important purchase, and I'm really excited because it'll allow us to do some things with that front that we've never done before. And mostly it provides a more safe way for kids to pass back and forth at any time. And so I'm very excited about this, and I'm real glad the district was able to do this. I move that the board adopt the resolution approving the purchase of approximately 1.562 acres of land located at 11787 Dragon Lane from Henry Abate for future school facilities.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. High school renovation.
Yes, sir. We're coming to you today, and I'm going to have Raphael speak on the evaluation and the process that we went through. But this is for the phase 1 of the high school renovation, which targets the CTE building and some ADA compliance throughout Southwest High School, and then also the vestibule in the front of the school. And so we've sent out bids, and so here, Raphael is here to talk about those and the evaluation process.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Great.
We opened bids on March 28th. 5 bids were received, and the ranges were $2,695,000 to $3,250,000. Through our evaluation process, we evaluated relevant experience, project management ability, subcontractors that the proposed general contractor is thinking of using, and price as well. What you have here is the updated list based on our latest evaluation. So the summary, Marksman General Contractors becomes the best value in terms of our evaluation points. For the district, they were also the lowest bidder. So included in the background, if you go to the second page, is the bid tab. And the way they were in order is the way the bids came in, but we also had 4 alternates. Alternate number 1 was to replace the roof. Alternate number 2 was to replace the glass block on the exterior of the building. Alternate number 3 is the restroom renovations, and alternate number 4 is the hallway update VCT, or replace the entire VCT on both levels of the CTE building. Our recommendation, though, is the bracket below. Again, highlighting Marksman, being that they're the best value, will be to go with alternate number 3, which is the restroom alterations, and alternate number 4 of the VCT flooring. We believe in our department that we can still take some good years on the roof to do it at a later date, or possibly even as phase 2 is approached. So our recommendation is that the board approve Marksman General Contractors for the Southwest High School renovation phase 1 project.
Yes, ma'am.
Have they done work for us before?
They have not. They're a fairly new company. They worked on north side and northeast. Many of the members of Marksman is a group from Joris. So some of the people that work for Marksman have actually worked on like McNair project that we've done before.
And their proposed superintendent did McNair. So individually, did McNair.
He was our superintendent for McNair.
Yes, so individually, they've done it, they've just broken out, and now they're part of this new company, or they founded this new company.
Okay.
But they have bid our projects before.
And so the overall construction budget was 2.8. And so with the recommendations that we're bringing to you, we're going to be a little over budget, but only by 21,000 to take care of. But we think that the building, we're going to paint the building in the hallways and all that. So the VCT is probably needs to be replaced. If you've been in there, it's kind of old and outdated. And so that would make it look a lot nicer, and also the restrooms. And so we think those 2 alternates would be good, and we'd only be 21,000 over. But we'd use other bond funds, because remember, this is a 2-package deal. And so overall, the construction budget is going to be 2.8, 21,500. And then there's some architectural fees and some other permits, so there's another 10% added to that. So overall, phase 1 will be about $3.1 million. And then taking that and then subtracting from, we kind of budgeted 12.8 for the Southwest High School renovation overall. And so we would subtract that, and then we could see what we have left for the phase 2 as we work through phase 2 and work with Pfluger. So we're asking for approval tonight for today for phase 1 at $2.8,021,500 to move forward.
I have a quick question, Brandon.
Yes.
Phase 2, what date are we looking at that? Is that like
Phase
next
2
year, or is that still for the summer?
Correct. Phase 2, yeah, we're going to be working through phase 2 as we're going through this last part of spring. And then talking with Pfluger, the recommendation is to bid it out at the end of summer.
Okay.
And then get started as soon as possible. This will be our project that will have to run through school year to summer to school year, kind of like we did with McAuliffe.
Okay.
And so that's the initial plan right now, unless we hear otherwise, or we, as a group, we decide to move it up or delay it, or
Okay.
we'll just have to kind of work those things out still. Because we're still kind of in the design phase
Okay.
and determining what we could do with the monies that are available.
Can you just touch on phase 1 includes the CTE wing?
That's correct.
Includes the vestibule?
The main high school security entry vestibule, there's also some ADA updates that the school needed to have, the locker rooms, showers, need to have ADA stalls, which they don't currently, so that will be part of this scope. Also, all the hardware, the door hardware that's not ADA accessible, that's part of this scope, and it's a lot of hardware that needs to
The
be.
entire school?
Correct.
Mainly.
The older part of the
That's
building.
part
of what we're approving today?
Yes, ma'am.
This is phase one.
Yes.
But the bulk is the CTE building, together with par audit items on security entry vestibule of Southwest High School main building.
Other questions?
I move. I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Moving down to items of information, the first thing we're gonna do on this, board members, is move down to D, safety and security officer.
Yes, sir, we got Mr. Mark Figueroa, who's going to.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, in 2005, Senate Bill 11 was adopted into law by our state legislature. It requires school districts to conduct safety and security audits of its facilities, both non-instructional and instructional, every 3 years. Currently, we are at the end of our 3-year cycle. We have to follow the audit procedures that are established by Texas School Safety Center. Part of the requirements of Senate Bill 11 also requires staff to present the results to the Board of Trustees. We also have Board Policy CK that mirrors the requirements for presenting and conducting the safety and security audits within our district. District staff sent out requested quotes from several vendors for audit services. 2 of them responded with proposals. We chose Centurion Solutions as they provided the best value for the district. They were also the vendor that performed the audits at our last cycle from 2013 and 14. Cost of the safety and security audit services for this cycle was $18,890. Locally budgeted funds were used for these services.
And what do they do?
They do the audit
They do the
services.
actual
The
audit?
actual audit, correct. And I'm going to
Make
go
sure
through that
we're
process.
In compliance
Compliant
with state
Correct,
regulations.
correct,
Yes, ma'am.
correct. And I have a PowerPoint that's going to go through the process a little bit more in detail. With me, I have Mr. Joe Candelario. He's with Centurion Solutions. He is the former assistant fire chief for the city of San Antonio as well. So he conducted the audits during our last cycle as well, back in 13 and 14. So after I present, if you have any questions, you can refer them to him.
I never know which button to push. Hey, that's it.
All right. Purpose of our audit, of course, is to maintain compliance with Senate Bill 11. It's also to evaluate our emergency preparedness within the district, to increase the safety awareness of our stakeholders, to ensure the highest level of safety for staff, students, and visitors to our campuses and to our facilities. And it also allows us to improve our campus and our district emergency operations plan. Those are the plans that guide us through any type of crisis or any urgent situations that come up. Senate Bill 11, as I described earlier, requires us to conduct audits every 3 years. We have to present the results to our Board of Trustees, sometimes during a closed session, sometimes in a smaller session such as this. Other requirements of Senate Bill 11 require that we have a multi-hazard emergency operation plan, not only for the district, but every campus must also have their own emergency operation plan that's tailor-made for their needs as well. Each district must also establish a safety and security committee that meets at least twice a year. We've met in the fall. We will meet again in the spring to go over our audit results as well after we present to you folks. The audited areas of interest include grounds, facility exterior, both interior building access to see if they can get in to the building without having to follow visitor policies. Science labs to make sure that we are compliant and that we're up to date with any requirements by the state as well as the federal government. Health practices, they do conduct interviews. They look at the logs with the nurses to make sure that medicines and other other medications are secure and then they don't have access to them. In the event that the nurse is out, that they ensure that the nurses also train other staff members to work with students that need medical attention. They look at our monitoring and our surveillance system, our camera system district-wide, look at the playground areas to see if there's any needs of improvement, check out the mechanical rooms, the custodial rooms as well. They do go in depth to look at our emergency operations plans to make sure that they have everything that's required of them. In the emergency operations plan, you have evacuation maps, teacher buddy systems. Each campus is also required to have their own emergency planning team, as well as their own incident command team in the event that there is an issue like a lockdown. That campus instructional, ICS team takes over before district takes over or first responders. So they've received training on that, and I'll go over that a little bit further along in my presentation. They look at our communication system, look at our radio system on how we communicate within the district with our police department as well, and then they look at our campus website to make sure that we're compliant. The audit itself only reflects the facilities for that one specific day. That's just a snapshot of what the campus is like or that facility. There's over 500 line items to assess, and they're scored by either in compliance, not in compliance, not applicable, or it wasn't assessed. The average score for each category is established, and then there's an overall facility score that's also calculated. And we'll present those results here shortly. For the instructional facilities, which is our campuses, it looks at visitor policies. It also looks at our policies and procedures. Among those, emergency operation plan, school climate and culture, health practices. Mr. Candelario also takes notes and has to fill out information on the observations, on the surveillance system, exterior, interior, any concerns he might have, or any positives that he may have seen as well. And then he reviews the EOPs as well as the campus website. The non-instructional facilities, and there were 5 that we looked at or that he audited. This building here, this main building, facilities and maintenance, our warehouse, transportation, and Dragon Stadium were those non-instructional facilities that he audited. And those were the categories that he looked at. On audit day, he arrives, and before he begins checking in, he starts to assess the exterior, walks around, usually gets there 7 in the morning or so, and tries to see if he can access the building without either being directed to the front office or being escorted by school personnel. He was not successful. That was a positive thing, and he'll answer that here shortly, so that was good. We really trained our staff to redirect everybody up to the front office. Upon check-in, he reviews the visitor policy, which he checks the logs to ensure that everybody's signing in, whether it's district staff, whether it's regular visitors, whether it's kids that are being checked out. He interviews the campus staff to gain information on culture and climate. And he interviewed not only the staff, he interviewed students as well. At the end, he interviews the nurse to make sure that, again, that they're logging in what they're doing with their students in terms of health practices, and also interviews the administrator to review the EOP, communication system, evacuation maps to make sure everything is current, and also goes through our surveillance system to make sure that our administrators have been trained on how to use that. Results, these are just a summary of our results, and you'll have in individual percentages that I presented to you in the booklet that I provided you as well, so you can go through that in more detail. What Mr. Candelario found was that we do have a high degree of foresight in support of Senate Bill 11. Campuses provide warm, welcoming environment, very clean, graffiti-free. Custodians do an outstanding job of upkeep, as well as our facilities and maintenance with the landscape. Our nurses are great in keeping record keeping, also securing medications and files, and they also work well with our staff to train them on how to use the AED, or in the event that they're out, how to deal with medical emergencies on campus. Also noted is that our campuses practice the emergency drills as required by law. So we have to do fire drills once a month, and then by law, we're only required to do lockdowns, severe weather, reverse evacuation, and then the AED. We're only required to do that once a year, but we practice that twice a year within the district at our campuses. Also made note of our Raptor system, great in ensuring that we do not have sex offenders coming to our campuses or having access to our kids. Administrators and staff we do a great job of training them, not only at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year. And as I mentioned earlier, the incident command system is something that we're trying to improve to make sure that all of our key administrators have that training to coordinate any efforts with the first responders that may show up to us when we're having any type of issue. Surveillance monitoring system, very high tech, state of the art. And then our EOP as a whole is consistent with the requirements from the City of San Antonio as well as Bexar County. Some of the needs from the instructional campuses included visitor signage, those signs on the doors reminding everybody, please check in at the front office. So that every exit door must have that sign. Parking decals are recommended for all staff, not only at the high school, but at the elementary level. That way, if we have any suspicious vehicles, we know whether they're related to a staff member or not. Classrooms found unlocked when not in use, and that's something that's ongoing. And we try to remind our teachers to make sure when you're not in that class, please be sure to secure it. Playground equipment needed repairs, and we had some borders on the outside that needed to be filed down a little bit, like the hard plastic ends of it. Those are things that we're going to work with facilities and maintenance to repair. And then some other minor repairs are needed, such as the benches and stuck doors need to be repaired. Some of that can be handled on campus, and some of that will require the assistance of facilities and maintenance. Our non-instructional facilities, which were those 5 sites I listed earlier, just as the campuses, very clean, graffiti-free, well-maintained. Our landscape, again, is well-maintained by our facilities and maintenance crew. Facilities were secured when the employees were not there. Materials were locked up. People could not have access to it to walk off with any of our equipment. Buses, in terms of transportation, the way that they're parked really facilitates it. If there's ever a need for an evacuation, they can make sure that they facilitate that and make sure everybody gets out of there without having any traffic jams or such. Buses have the emergency equipment that are required, state-of-the-art camera systems, and at our district event, there's a strong presence of law enforcement, so security in the event that our PD is not there as well. Areas of improvement, visitor badges. We don't do that, and we're working on making sure that all of our non-instructional facilities have signings, such as this building, and that there's visitors badges if they're not district employees. Directional evacuation signage is needed, and if there's a fire drill or we need to evacuate for any reason. Visitor signage like the campuses for the doors. Eye wash stations are needed, especially at transportation and facilities and maintenance, and at our warehouse as well. And then they recommend a sprinkler system at our warehouse. It's not required, but they recommend that. These are the overall results for 2016-17 by campus. Very high scores. Did an outstanding job. The administrators did great. The staff did great. Our overall rating for our instructional facilities was at 97%. Now, I have that information for you in a booklet that I provided. And you have the individual reports for each campus as well. So you can review that on the visitor policies, observations, the website, if you want to look at that in detail. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer those later for you. Our non-instructional facilities had an overall rating of 95%. And to provide additional information, if you can open up the very last page of your booklet, that is our historical data for the 3-year cycles. We started conducting audits back in 2010 and 11. As you can tell, we've had the highest scores that we've ever had with safety. And the apples to apples is really comparing with 2013 and 14 because we had the same auditor for the last cycle as well as for this one. Questions?
I have a comment. I don't know if this is if this is the place to say it or not say it, but I've had a couple conversations with some substitutes over the last, year or two, and I don't know if this is addressed or not at any point about their training when it comes to evacuations, and especially at the high school when you get large numbers of substitutes out because of games and So all of a sudden, you've got quite a few substitutes in case of an emergency. Something about keys and who has keys and who doesn't, and they lock the rooms. If you're having a lockdown drill, I think they're supposed to lock the rooms or something.
Yes,
And they
correct.
may not be able to sometimes, and I don't know if we have procedures for that,
Well,
or how they get trained.
I conduct training in the summer and also in the fall. I coordinate that with Mr. Magura, so there's 4 sessions that I have
For the substitutes?
for the substitutes,
Okay,
for all the
good.
district substitutes that are at least registered at that time.
Okay.
I give 30-minute safety presentation, go over the drills, go over a checklist of what they need to do when they're in there. Benefit of me being on the campus as well as Mr. Magura is we can kind of go over that as former principals as well, of how they can help out the campuses. And then in the fall, when we have his next round of hiring, we do that usually in October again. Didn't do one in the spring, but that's something that we can look into.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the keys,
Do we require it from the substitute? I mean, like, do we make sure that all the substitutes?
we
do
try,
that?
yes,
Okay.
ma'am, yes,
Yeah, we
ma'am.
try to
And if
require
it's
them to
somebody
do
that was
trainings.
hired later on, then we probably just missed them, or they
They have to
were
go
hired
at the
after.
next cycle.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. But we'll continue to do that. We've done it the past 2 summers,
Okay.
just to make sure that they have that same information. Because it's difficult, because they're not on the same campus every day,
Right.
and every campus kind of deals with things
A little
differently.
bit differently?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we try to make it uniform where it's consistent, and we share what we train them with all the principals that were there aware of what they've been trained on.
Okay.
Mr. Candelario, I don't know if you had any questions for him?
We also conduct a survey with the substitutes. What do you do in the event of? Who's going to lock your door? Generally, the principal of that particular campus gives them instructions that the instructor next door or across the hall will come in and lock the door, or the janitor. But we make sure that somebody has the capability of locking those doors in the event that you have a lockdown.
Thank you.
Any other comments, sir? Did you want to?
No, and the only comment that I can say is that I've done safety school audits all over the state of Texas, and it was a pleasure to see that Southwest had probably one of the cleanest campuses that I've conducted audits. All of the educators were very knowledgeable, friendly. The staff, janitors, they do a great job maintaining the facilities. So it made my job that much easier.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I didn't catch that part about the substitute locking. If we go on lockdown, the substitute has to wait for a teacher to come lock their classroom?
If it has the locknetics, some of them have locknetics, some of them have keys. If they don't have a code, or there's not a general subcode that they programmed, then they usually have the magnet. There's a magnet that covers the door jamb, where all you have to do is remove the magnet and it closes.
And they leave it locked.
Hand lock.
Doors are supposed to remain locked throughout the door. That's the recommendation from the Texas School Safety Center. During the instructional day, all doors must remain locked, as they've requested. Sometimes, it gets hot in there, teachers open their doors, for whatever reason, but that's the recommendation. So the door should always remain locked, because it's difficult if a teacher's working with a kid back to the door to go and try to get to that door if there's something going on. So that's why they recommend that.
So the teacher and the subs know to keep the door closed.
We tell them that, but it doesn't, the practice necessarily doesn't happen all the time.
And I
so
think even during the drills, I think sometimes, because they are a drill and they know it's a drill, then the teacher that's supposed to go lock doesn't necessarily, go and lock, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
Yeah.
But that's something we can continue to work with.
What's done responsibly in the campuses, if there's a substitute in the classroom, the door is locked automatically if you use a script. And so it's clear passage, unless the teacher's inside, the students then move the script and close it. If there's a lockdown, it's already locked.
Yeah.
But it does create an issue until we can get to a point in time where we kind of have the key entry.
Right.
Entry into it.
It's a technology thing then,
Very
right?
expensive to get there, but we're always going to have these anomalies where something happened when a substitute came in and they don't have all the information or not.
There's confusion.
Diligence to make sure they're set up for the day. And we can always do a better job as a district to make sure that's on our radar screen. We're always kind of talking about that. We're always bringing it up in the meeting, have those conversations. It's important.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, walkthroughs are a lot different nowadays. We used And now you walk into a door and you try to walk in and forget. They do have them locked for the day. I mean, I've never seen 99% of our doors locked.
Wow.
They're actually locked to get in.
Yeah.
There's a very conscientious awareness of safety in the district.
So is that part of our substitute training?
Yes, when I do conduct training, I do let them know that. Yes, ma'am.
You know, when they have those girls up in out there with them, they're very orderly and the time limits, and they're very careful about that.
The other thing we've implemented is a buddy system. So in the event that the teacher is out, that teacher always has a buddy for that, to assist the sub.
Right.
To help them walk through the procedures on how to conduct them.
It's kind of like the plane, you know, when you get on the airplane and they're going through all
Yeah.
the, then you're looking at your phone and stuff. And then when the,
When it happens,
The drill happens, what do I do?
yes.
You YouTube it then.
yeah. Okay,
Anything
thank
else?
you.
All right, thank you guys.
I just want to commend Mr. Figueroa. He really has a really great handle on safety and awareness, and does a great job of making sure we're all aware and we're all doing our due diligence. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next thing on the agenda, board members, will go to item A and item B. Combine those two.
And today we have the dynamic duo, Velia Terraces and Renee Munn, and that's why the presentation is actually combined, because we don't, they're separate from each other. And so, here they are.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. While she's pulling that up, I think you recall last brown bag, Velia actually presented on biliteracy. And so this is just another addition to that.
Thank you, Renee. So I'm going to go ahead and start out, and thank you for allowing us to present today. The first thing that I'm going to go ahead and start off with is the dual language program, and we just wanted to go ahead and recap where we are and where we're going with our program. So we are into our second year of implementation with the dual language one-way 50-50 program. And we have 10 out of our 11 elementary campuses that are participating in that program. Crewald is an ESL-only campus because they don't have enough numbers for dual language participants or participants to be in a bilingual program. So if any students do need those services, those are rerouted to Big Country Elementary. We have 95 bilingual certified active teachers in pre-K through 5th grade that are teaching in those campuses, and those teachers do receive a $2,000 stipend for the entire year. Our current numbers as of March 27th are 2,935 LEP students pre-K through 12th grade. So that doesn't just include elementary, that includes all of our students, and 83% of our students, or approximately 83% of our students, are identified as LEP, but were actually born in the United States. And I think that's an important point to point out, because a lot of times we hear that we have a lot of newcomers, or we have a lot of students who are coming in from out of the country, and that's not actually the case. If you look at our numbers, our students are actually born here.
Can you just refresh my memory what the dual language one-way?
Yes, and that actually takes me to my next screen. So when we talk about the dual language one-way 50-50 program, that program did take a shift. If you recall, we were at one point a bilingual late exit model, and that was a transitional model that took away the students' native language and transitioned them into the English only. Then we kind of went for a year into the early exit model, which was also a transitional model and also did away with the students' native language. We did have dual language two-way model, but when we actually evaluated the program, which is part of No Child Left Behind requirements, that we do a yearly evaluation and part of the ESSA requirements, we actually found that the program was functioning as a bilingual transitional model. It was following the exact same model when we actually evaluated it. So
When you say we were trying the two-way, that's why?
I'm sorry?
What does that mean, the two-way?
We had students, so we adopted, from what I understand, at a point, certain principals at certain campuses adopted the two-way model, and we did have a recruiting system where we were allowing non-LEP students or native English speakers to participate in the program. Throughout the years, I really can't speak to how that recruiting continued, or even if it did continue or not. But when we actually did a program evaluation, we found that there were more LEP students participating in those classrooms than non-LEP students.
So I have
And-
no knowledge, let me address that. So the two-way basically means that there are students in the classroom who are there to learn English, and there are students in that same classroom who are there to learn Spanish. So it's two-way. If it's one way, that means the students are bilingual, they're there to learn English. And so for 4 years, we did a dual language, two-way program in our school district. And in the fourth year, of the 4 campuses that were participating in elementary, we were able to analyze how many students were in those dual language programs. When you start with K and you move up to K1 and you move to K1, 2. And so we're at K1, 2, 3 that year. And so there was a total of 10 students who were in all the programs, the two-way programs, that were in a classroom to basically learn Spanish in that two-way model. So when you look at what we were spending for those teachers at the 4 campuses, 4 times 3, both teaching FTEs, it really wasn't feasible to continue really the two-way program. And so it was fall back, where can we use our funds in a more efficient and appropriate way, as opposed to spending $250,000 and we really have to. Now, I don't know if that was because we didn't present it right, or when you talk in conversation, it's just that the interest wasn't there in our school district to do that. But dual language is a really great program, 50-50. And this program is a move away from what we were doing in 90-10 when you're 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, take it at 50-50. So that's the history that I have in a two-way model.
I have one more question. I don't remember if it was the meeting, the last real board meeting we had, or the meeting before that, I don't remember. But remember you were showing us something, I don't know who it was presenting, but they were showing us how well the students had done, and I want to say it was
It was Lisa Bolte when she presented the taper report.
and so then I asked, well, if they did so well, why didn't we keep doing it? And so, do you remember, was it the dual?
It was the
two-way?
dual. It was a dual.
Do you have any information
So,
about
yes,
that?
so from what we discussed, it was the students that were participating in the dual language in those classrooms, but to my understanding, when that taper and that data is assessed, it's assessed for all students that are participating in that program, so not necessarily LEP students. So one of the things is with the dual language too, we know that those students that are non-LEP do very well. They're native English speakers, we know they're going to do well. That data doesn't necessarily mean that they tested in Spanish, or that doesn't necessarily say that they tested in English, because when we actually looked at what that cohort did in 3rd grade, what they tested, all of them tested in English, and they were native English speakers. So the purpose and the goal of the program is for native English speakers to learn Spanish. So, and the way to assess that would be for them to more than likely administer the assessment for them in Spanish.
But they had it administered.
They had it in their native language, English.
So they pulled the scores up.
But how did,
I can't speak to
Assuming.
testing, yes,
but how did the Spanish speakers, okay.
The
Did
Spanish
the Spanish
speakers-
speakers take the Spanish test or the
Some of them
English
did, and some of them did take English. Some of them might have taken both, but from what I understand, all the data is put together. Spanish and, it's aggregated Spanish and English testers, all that data is put together.
Okay.
So whether they tested in English or in Spanish, you're right, they did do very well.
So I guess my question would be, what benefit did the Spanish-speaking kids get from having the English-speaking kids in the, like, do they learn better with the peer modeling, or, I don't even know if modeling's the right word, or do they learn better with just Spanish-speaking kids in there and the teacher trying to teach them English?
There is research that shows both. So when you have a dual language two-way with non-English speakers and with Spanish speakers participating together, they learn off of each other. And it all depends on how the program is run and what type of training the teachers have gotten, because in those cases, a lot of times you have one teacher who facilitates nothing but the English instruction, and then you have one teacher who facilitates nothing but the Spanish instruction, instead of one teacher having to go back and forth between languages. A lot of times what those programs do tend to do and focus, though, is focus on the native English speakers, because they want them to learn Spanish. But at the same time, what happens to the LEP population is they're still trying to catch up. So the benefit of having an actual, especially in the situation that we've been in, the dual language one-way 50-50, it allows us to mainly focus on our LEP population, which is really what we need in regards to PBMAS and everything else that we've seen with our long-term ELLs. So when we talk about a one-way 50-50, it's only servicing identified limited English proficient students, or what we call as LEP. Now, we still have under Chapter 89 where parents can request to put a child in that classroom, and depending on whether the campus has staff and has enough available room, then they can allow them to be in there. But it's not a recruiting system anymore as it was with the dual language two-way.
Yeah, I guess I'm just disappointed in that part, because as a parent, I would have liked to have had my kids in learning to speak Spanish. I mean, well, I speak very little Spanish, but as opposed to them starting in high school, because what they learned in high school, they don't even know. I mean, they can't speak Spanish. So they spent 2 or 3 years in high school learning to speak Spanish, which they can't do. Had they had the opportunity, or had I known, I don't even know that I knew we could put them in there, they'd just be so much further ahead in the job market.
I agree.
Because, I mean, that's really, it's such a benefit when you can put that on your resume that you're bilingual.
And I think it's critical. Number one, I don't think we could answer your question, Ms. Sadilkin, on how did it impact the LEP students who had the English speakers that were non-LEP in there. We had 10 kids spread across 12 classrooms, right? So statistically, I don't think we could answer that question. The second thing, one of the first things she talked about at the beginning of the presentation was that the dual language two-way model was actually being taught in eval. What we determined was that it was being taught as a transitional model. And what that means is we were basically depleting the home language of the student and taking away that language, as opposed to the approach of giving both languages. And so I think that y'all will be pleased with kind of what's coming up in the next part of this presentation. So.
And you're right, because one of the other goals, and I don't know if this was discussed at any point or not when we first started the dual language two-way, but eventually the goal is to continue it at the middle school level, at the high school level, to carry it out throughout. So I don't think that much of extensive planning had gone into it. So with the one-way 50-50 that we are continuing with our second year, it does serve only identified LEP students. It does provide instruction in core content in both English and in Spanish, and especially with the 50-50 model. The main goal is to develop fluency and literacy in both languages, in English and in Spanish, so that way we're not taking away and we're not transitioning students only to English. We want them to remain bilingual. And then the ultimate goal is integration of bilingualism, biliteracy, cross-cultural awareness, and then of course high academic achievement. We want them to be held to the same expectations as all our other students. So some of the minimum requirements of our program require that 50% of the instruction can be carried out in that other language, which in our case is Spanish. So 50% of the content has to be taught in Spanish, 50% has to be taught in English. It has to address all curriculum requirements as identified in Chapter 74. It has to include a foundation, enrichment, or what we refer to as our ELPS, our English Language Proficiency Standards for language development, and then of course our college and career readiness standards. So some of the initiatives that we have coming up with the program, and I'm going to go ahead and present, and then I will transfer it over to Renee Munn. We are looking at a 3-year biliteracy professional development program, and that is the actual second packet that you have in your folder. That is the project proposal that we have. It would be actually begin with a cohort of teachers to begin with in the year 17-18, pre-K, kinder, and first grade teachers to go through the training of what does it really mean to teach and what does it look like to teach for biliteracy. Because we can't assume that people know how to do this, or that teachers know how to do this, or that administrators know what it looks like, or even at the CNI level that we know what it looks like. So we have to make sure that they get the proper training if that's what our goal is going to be. Then the cohort would continue with 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, and then it would continue with 4th and 5th grade teachers. So we have done some research in regards to this. We have with Round Rock ISD, with Austin ISD, and other districts. One of the other initiatives is that we are possibly going to be applying for a $350,000 grant approximately with the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of English Language Acquisition for National Professional Development. It does require that we partner up with a local education agency or state education agency, And in this case, we will be meeting with Texas A&M University in San Antonio on Thursday to watch the pre-application webinar to see what it all entails, because it's pretty lengthy. But we're probably thinking about establishing a master's cohort to create some of our teachers and grow them for bilingual education or biliteracy coaches, if that's where we're going. What does Southwest ISD need, and what does Texas A&M, what can they do to partner up with us? And so the grant would pay for the teachers to go through this program, and likewise, the way that we're doing the leadership with a special ed focus, we would probably require our teachers to serve some time with us and make sure that they don't leave. And then one of the last things, and I thank you, Ms. Adolkin, for bringing up that question, is we are eventually looking at making sure that this is something that has longevity and that we can possibly even carry out into the secondary schools. So one of the things that we're consulting with Ms. Sandra Hernandez, which is the Lote teacher, the Spanish teacher over at the high school, is how can we identify some of our students for this graduating year so that we may award them a seal of biliteracy. The TEA and State of Texas do have some requirements that they have to meet in order for that. They don't have to be identified as LEP students. They have to have a certain grade point average. They have to pass their English classes. If they at any point were identified as English language learners, then they have to have met their exit criteria on TELPAS and so forth. So we're actually going to be pulling and identifying a cohort of students that we could possibly be awarding this seal of biliteracy to by the end of the year. We're hoping. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and transfer over to Renee because it's just going to feed right in.
All right. And thank you guys for entertaining us this morning and hearing our story. We're really excited to talk to you guys not only about our bilingual program, but some of our other special programs that all feed into the big picture of literacy in our district. So some of what we're going to talk about today is in progress, and we want to be very transparent in our progress and work and maybe some potential roadblocks, and we're open to any feedback that you guys might have. So I want to divert your attention specifically to dyslexia because this has been a special area for me. And as I've worked on improving this program for our students, it's really is what bridged my work with Velia. And so as I was looking at students who had been identified as dyslexic, I saw some very specific trends. And I think that you guys will see those as well as we kind of go through that data. These are current numbers of students identified in our district as dyslexic, and then their additional sub-pops. So we have total numbers, and then those who are additionally identified as English language learners, special education students, and then those double. And you can stop me if you have questions.
When do we normally diagnose them with dyslexia? When do you see it?
So this is my second year in Southwest ISD, and it was my understanding just from looking through records that traditionally students were identified around 4th to 6th grade. What research tells us and what our Texas Dyslexia Handbook states multiple times is that the best time to refer a student for dyslexia evaluation is very early on. I would say, and I'm an educational diagnostician as well, we can get a really good assessment on a student in that spring of 1st grade, where those gaps of what is normal for a milestone versus a possible disability really start to distinguish themselves.
Do we adjust them in the first?
So this year, starting this year, we have dropped that down where I have encouraged and trained all of our campus dyslexia designees to be looking for characteristics of dyslexia and getting that information to the teacher so that we are identifying students much earlier.
Is there a test that you can give first graders and then they just all take the test and then you look at the results and say, okay, we better check?
That's a really good question. So what the handbook states is that first, all students are required in the state of Texas to participate in a universal screener. And in our district, our universal screener is iStation, in which they take their monthly ISIP report. Then we use that data from ISIP to look for indicators of students who are at risk for reading difficulties. Based on that information, the teachers are supposed to create a service plan or RTI for those students to see if that RTI will remediate some of those deficits. Those students who continue to demonstrate deficits in reading, in spite of those research-based interventions, and show deficits or characteristics of dyslexia, those are the students that we should be identifying for that track of testing for dyslexia.
But the test that you said they take, on, I don't remember what you called it.
iStation.
Yeah, is that first grade?
Yes, so all of our elementary students take that iStation ISIP test monthly. So we do have that data. Once students are identified for dyslexia testing, there's a separate battery of tests that the state of Texas requires us to administer in order to come back with a comprehensive assessment and results of their strengths and weaknesses. But that universal screener is really important for us to identify early on who is at risk for reading and possible at risk for being identified as dyslexic.
And are we doing that? Are we getting first grade, or did you say first grade?
This is the first year that it has been customary to assess in first grade. And although we did not have a lot of referrals in first grade, I can see the trend changing. So campus teachers and staff are more knowledgeable and willing to make that recommendation. And I highly recommend that. It's much easier, you guys, to remediate a student who's still learning how to read in the classroom with a dyslexia intervention as well.
What is the test contain? What are you looking for?
When we actually refer them for the dyslexia evaluation, so we take in multiple sources of data. So we're going to take information from the parent. Is there a history of dyslexia in the family? Because we know that runs about 50% of our students who have somebody else in the family who is identified as dyslexic. There's about a 50% chance that they also may have that disability. So we're also looking at educational opportunities. Has the student received good quality educational opportunities in the classroom? Have they had access to the classroom, multiple absences, or did they attend school? We are also looking at what is their overall strengths and weaknesses. Students that are dyslexic are really quite puzzling to the teacher. It should puzzle you that student's having difficulty acquiring those skills in order to be a good reader. Their overall intelligence is usually average to above average. They often have very good speaking skills, listening skills, but when they're asked to read and print, they struggle. And so often you'll see that these students will accelerate in other areas, sometimes math, science, fine arts. And so they really are different from many other disabilities that we think about. These are smart kids. They have a lot of potential, and with the right intervention, they can go a long ways.
But it's important to note there's a lot of misconceptions about dyslexia. Like popular things to know is a lot of people think it's letter reversals, things like that, and that's a common misconception. That is an associated characteristic that doesn't occur all the time with dyslexic students. So things you're looking for really are their ability to decode words and their phonological awareness, and that's in the definition for you. So,
As a deficit.
and so these misconceptions get out among parents and even teachers. And that's something that we need to work on, providing better education to our parents and students about what exactly dyslexia is and is not.
And you'll see that I have a plan for how we can make that happen. But that is a good point. So in addition, we're looking at some cognitive processes. We're going to assess different academic areas to identify what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses. And then our state handbook has some very specific questions that we must answer in order to determine eligibility.
Does gender play a role in the number of dyslexic students?
Wow, you know, that's been a debate for about 60 years. And as of recently, they have seen a higher number of males being identified as dyslexic, but there's a lot of argument among the scientists about why that is. And often we find that males that are struggling in the classroom are often have an associated behavior difficulty as well. So they're more often pinpointed for referrals to special ed, for dyslexia, and or other services. Good question. These are the numbers by campus at the elementary level. And although Creedwell does not have a bilingual program on campus, they do have about 22 students identified as left. I feel that we probably under-identified students who are English language learners. And so that's something that Valia and I have talked about quite a bit on how we can improve that referral rate and find those students who both have dyslexia and maybe are not strong in their native language. And because Spanish is such a transparent language, with the right assessment and somebody who's highly qualified and as a bilingual evaluator, those deficits really stand out.
And so I'm going to key on when I looked at this presentation, this was of interest to me. When you look at our campuses and you see Elm Creek, which is one of our highest performing campuses, really when you look at the data, it's like, wow, what's happening differently? And so what we know is that one of the issues that we have is that we have several different evaluators because we contract that out. That is not something that we have capacity right now in the system to do ourselves. And so there is discrepancy in who is actually doing the evaluation and who gets in the program, who does not, and things like that. We're planning to put a fix on that, a permanent fix for next year. And then when you look at the time that these kids are being put into programming, it is late in the game at some of the places where all of a sudden, you know, you get a fifth grade teacher who is a high performing teacher, and they're truly puzzled with what is happening with this child. And so for K through fourth grade, this child has not received any services or intervention. And when you look at the test history, they have continued to be not successful. And so now they get a teacher that's is important to them, and all of a sudden you start seeing the referrals come in. And so last year we actually ended up making a move for our middle schools because we had identified in grade 5, 87 students, I believe, dyslexia, who are getting ready to move on to middle school, and we have no support services
Who
there
had
for
not
them.
been identified.
Who had not been.
Fell
So
through the
we had rearranged some things with the ARCs last year, and now those people are actually on the middle school campuses being able to provide services, right? And so I think that I keyed in on this big time. Matter of fact, had a sit-down conversation with her about it, and that's been interesting to me. And then one of the critical things is where you have campus leadership that has that reading background, you tend to see a lot less numbers because they can identify and intervene a lot quicker is what I think is happening. So anyway, so I just wanted to key in on that.
And just if I can piggyback as well, because as we have been collaborating, even before Renee came on, Will and our department had started collaborating, and we started identifying that this is a need for us, especially with servicing our English language learners, which all connects back to what does our model look like? What is our goal? Is our goal to transition to English, or is our goal for our students to really learn and be biliterate in both languages, which is the goal of the one-way 50-50. So one of the things that we have seen also is how are these students being identified and how are they being serviced? Because teaching for literacy in English is a lot different than teaching for literacy in Spanish. So this is one of the things that we have really, like she said, we've come together, we've partnered up, we've been talking about it, and it's actually been going on for a few years that we've kind of coming together in a plan now.
And the conversation about looking at our English language learners and dyslexia is that we've come across kids in this cohort of about 4th to 5th grade that have been through maybe more than one model of dual language or bilingual program and are having difficulty reading in either language. But when we go back and we look at the different types of instruction they've received in reading, it's no wonder that they're struggling now. So we do have this pocket of cohort of students that we probably need to plan differently for them in order to meet their individual reading needs. Oh, one other thing, I'm sorry, you guys. Go ahead.
Pocket of cohort
Students that identified as English language learners that are struggling in both languages. They're not strong readers.
Are they together?
They're sporadic throughout the district.
Okay. So they're really not as a cohort together.
A grade level cohort across the district.
And I think if you take data at our ninth grade campus with our LEP students who are struggling, might be a good case for a research project for someone, but I would bet they were struggling readers in their own language. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And which is why the biliteracy approach is so much more beneficial than just, I'm the LEP program and you're the reading program. You need to be both.
Is it something that we might want to have, like 2 or 3 campuses that we just really supported with the kids that have dyslexia, that we would send them maybe for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, or something where we are not trying to give all, however many campuses there are, like spreading out the expertise, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's actually part of discussions with our reading interventionists, is making them itinerant, so that where we have a greater need, that to service dyslexic students in particular, that we're able to share resources between campuses. Does that make sense? It would address the issue, is that because I think that we're going to have more dyslexic students probably identified early on, and providing them appropriate services is going to become real critical to their success 3, 4, 5. But some campuses are going to just have less numbers. And so sharing resources now becomes kind of, and we call that an itinerant position, so that we're not, it could be a cost savings to us where we're really honing in on one particular area, or we share resources between 2 different campuses.
The other piece to consider is, by and far, many of our students that are receiving special education services are identified as having a specific learning disability, and with many of those disabilities lying in the area of reading, but very few are actually identified as dyslexic. And so Texas is one of those unique states in which dyslexia is traditionally served under Section 504, which is a general education program. But those students whose needs are quite more significant and need a specialized plan of instruction would be served under special education. But looking at the data, I suspect we probably have more students in special education that probably need to be assessed for dyslexia and provided, or at least offered, those services as well. These are our referral numbers so far this year. Some of those students went through the complete battery of assessment. Some of those were considered as far as looking at additional data, going back and look at their iStation, their universal screening. But those are the kids that have been looked at seriously for dyslexia evaluations. Unfortunately, you guys, I don't have data on this from previous years. That was not something we kept at the district level. We now have a database in which we are tracking all of that. So I can tell you who made the recommendation, whether it was the RTI committee or the ARD committee or the parent, and how many of those students received a full comprehensive evaluation. And then not only that, we're going to be tracking what were the results of those evaluations.
So right now, we don't have a percentage of students that are actually going to be dyslexic from that number? Or are those that?
So at the end of this year, I'll have a percentage of where those students fell. So some of those students are still in the process.
Right.
And so by the end of this year, once we finish the year out, I'll be able to tell you which percentage were actually assessed, which ones actually qualified, what was the percent that did not qualify. This just goes back to the English language learner, and I just want to bring to everybody's attention that the services for a student who's identified as an English language learner, whether the dyslexia services are in English or in Spanish, is determined by their committee. So if that student is a special education student, that would be determined by the ARD/LPAC committee. Same thing with Section 504/LPAC. And so there has to be a decision on what is in the student's best interest in order to make adequate gains. Same thing for our special education students. Services are always determined by that ARD committee as to if the services are provided in the special education setting or general education setting, and we would always side on that least restrictive environment when possible. The law is our Texas Dyslexia Handbook. I did print out a few pages from that handbook, but the entire handbook is available online, and I did give you guys the website. It is very easy to read. If you have an interest in this area, it's a great resource for you. What our handbook does state is that each school must provide a student identified with dyslexia access to a teacher who is trained in dyslexia and related disorders. There are specific components of instruction for students with dyslexia, and that is the part that I did print out for you guys that is in your folder. So
I have a quick question
Go ahead.
before you go. I just have, so if a child receives services in elementary, say, and they get better, and they do well, and, you know, they catch up, is it possible for that student to lose ground because we don't provide services in middle school and have a setback by the time they're in high school?
Possibly. So our dyslexia program, and I did give you a handout, we are using the Dyslexia Intervention Program, or DIP, which the service center, one of the service centers created. It's an Orton Gillingham approach, very hands-on. And the other one that we're piloting is through the Scottish Rite Hospital. It's called the Take Flight program. It's a much more rigorous dyslexia program that's meant to give students very long-term skills for success. So it goes into a lot of very in-depth training on Latin roots, Greek root words, so that when you go and you're in a calculus class in high school or a chemistry class, that you have the readability in order to attack some of those really big words that we expect students to be able to read and understand in high school. So if the services are provided very intensely and with fidelity early on, the student theoretically should have the tools of success that will carry them throughout their career at Southwest ISD and on towards college or other areas. Either program is meant to be a 2-year program, so they should be able to complete all of the lessons within 2 years. But as a committee, whether that's students in Section 504 or ARD or RTI, we should be reviewing their progress throughout the year and offering them services if at any point they demonstrate the need. And so, yes, we should be looking at those students in middle school and high school.
But I don't know, I don't think we've been doing that in a structured way up until now.
Well,
Am I correct?
We need to do that to our 504 meeting. That means we need to increase the training for our 504 committee members to know exactly what to look for and what are the markers that we need to provide those services again.
Right. Good questions. So a couple of things to point out. All of our elementary campuses now have a trained dyslexia interventionist who is either using the DIP or Take Flight program. And of course, like Dr. Fay mentioned, we did train all the middle school RTI coaches to use the DIP program, and they are doing so with every 6th grader identified and in need of that intervention. And the results of that has been pretty incredible.
So that speaks to the concern, because we have these RTI coaches who are involved in all those RTI meetings, 504 meetings. They can be that expert, if you will, to look at those results.
So are we set up, so say for example, if I know a student that's a 10th grader now and is struggling and had been identified in elementary, but had caught up and did well through middle school, but now he's struggling again, what do you do at that point?
Well, that student probably is still identified 504, and so they should go to a 504 committee and look at the results and go through the 504 process, which will ask, do you need further evaluation at that point? And so.
And they can still receive services in high school
And they should
again?
have- By law, we have to have someone trained at the high school who has that training to provide those services.
Do we have that? I
Right
know we're
now-
supposed to have it, but-
Right now, we can improve in that area. That's what
Okay.
I'm saying.
So we don't.
We have someone
Trained.
Training. But we need to improve the training.
Okay.
Good questions. My recommendation for next year was to expand those services to include 7th grade students. So any of the 7th grade students that need that dyslexia intervention. I would like for that to be available to them. And then for the following year after that, to the 8th grade students as well. Speaking to your high school question, my recommendation was to identify a high school teacher, one at Legacy, one at Southwest High School, and have them trained to provide dyslexia intervention and offer that to our 9th and 10th grade students next year, and then the year after that, additionally expand that to 11th and 12th grade. Our reading interventionists at Creedwell and Spicewood Park began training at Scottish Rite for the Take Flight program. And our recommendation was to additionally train the Resnick RTI coach in Take Flight, and then identify one additional elementary interventionist in that program, with the idea of to continue to add teachers year after year, so that we can have an entire district of trained certified academic language therapists to provide that dyslexia service.
That's the improvement we're talking about. And the Resnick RTI coach actually received a grant from the program?
Yes. Yeah. So her first year will be paid through a grant. ARCs at Creedwell, Hidden Cove, and Elm Creek were trained to teach the DIP program because we had such a high number of students in need, and the principals were very supportive in that. And so they additionally have helped us out this year in providing dyslexia intervention on those campuses. And so I think Dr. Bay already talked about, you know, how can we meet those needs later on should they arise. Just a few other things. We are required, every teacher who has to renew her certification or his certification must receive some continuing education credits in dyslexia when they service any student that is dyslexic. So we did offer some PDs for that. My recommendation was to create a trainer-of-trainer model from the district level and then train our campus designees on a very specific training so that then they could go out and we would have a systematic training for that. Because each skill set for some of our interventionists on the campus varies. It would be nice to have something very unified so that we were all speaking the same language.
Yes.
And then continue to revise that plan, as you can see, add in additional folks that are in need of that training, like our special education staff, LPAC committee, like what Will referred to for their 504 designees. We currently, like Dr. Fay mentioned, we have 2 part-time evaluators that were hired to help us with dyslexia assessments. My recommendation next year was to consider expanding that and hire an actual certified evaluator to help us with not only those monolingual but bilingual evaluations so that we can have really good data come back and hopefully reduce the number of late referrals. And then I mentioned that we're collecting the data, so at the end of this year we'll have a lot more information on the success, roadblocks, and possibly future recommendations for dyslexia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So you've got 3 minutes, Delia.
What did you?
There's more.
The framework, this is ours.
Oh.
Yeah.
You can go.
3 minutes. So
fast.
Guys, this is actually very simple, because not simple in the work, but simple in explaining, because it feeds right into everything we've already discussed. We have our biliteracy framework that we're working on, and Velia and I just talked about the fact that it shouldn't be her kids or my kids or your kids. These are all of our kids, and I showed you the data. We have students that are in multiple populations that kind of fit in different categories. And so when we look at literacy planning, anything that Velia is working on should feed into our entire district strategic plan. And so that's really what I wanted to just kind of put to the forefront of everybody's minds, is that we're working in different areas, but we're working really together. We have some work with SA Reads, in which we've been providing for the last several years tutoring with in-service teachers at Texas A&M to our K through 2nd students. Actually, it's K through 3rd. I'm sorry, that's a mistype. Next year, we're additionally going to expand that to our 4th graders with a focus on fluency. In addition, we're working on piloting a literacy academy at Spicewood Park so that we can work on this literacy framework for the entire district. So we're going to work on some specific and targeted PDs for that campus so that we can monitor the success and roadblocks of our literacy framework and then use that as a model to use at other campuses as well. Dr. Fay did form a core literacy team, and so those are the folks that are part of that. I am excited to say that I will be going up to Austin in May to be trained to provide some of the literacy academies that are put out by TEA and the Meadows Center. So we will be bringing that back to Southwest ISD. And Jesse has been in contact with the Service Center about hosting some of those trainings in our district. We've talked about the biliteracy program. Actually, Belia talked about that piece. Do you have anything to add to this, Dr. Fay? Let's get it right the first time. I think I was in Dr. Versa, your office one day, and you had mentioned, why do we wait so long to help students? Why do we not help them earlier? And my quote back to him was, well, let's try to get it right, and let's try to do it the first time. And so my recommendation is not to wait for kids to fail and fail in reading, because we know that by and far those that are not on target by 3rd grade will probably not be on target in 9th grade. And sadly, that's in spite of many of the things that we do in order to help them later on. It's a continued roadblock. So really working towards improving literacy rates in the early grades through teaching scientifically based reading strategies and providing interventions. And then lastly, also planning for need. We know that we're going to have students coming into the year at risk for reading difficulties, and planning through targeted grants, combining our work through the biliteracy program, our district initiative to increase vocabulary and oral language skills of our students. All of these things you see listed are going to improve the success rates for all of our students. So, thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Very good.
I think you can see we have some really professional folks working at a literacy framework that is comprehensive in nature and that just crosses all over. These are really great. So I learned something every time I listen to them. That's why we should have been talking.
And I want to say thank you to the curriculum instruction team, because one of the things that has happened is we are really starting to talk as if these were our kids, whether they're bilingual or LEP or special education or whatever. And I know I've harped on it enough to where I think the point has been made, it's been taken, and so you do see a lot more cross-department work within curriculum instruction. Almost because it's been demanded that they're all of our kids, and if we can't speak like that, then how would we ever expect a teacher in the classroom to see them any differently? So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. That was very good.
All right, the last thing on the
Business and finance, we went to your meeting.
You did, yeah.
We ought to all be able to understand this.
Yes. So we have Brian Pinarts and his academic coach with us today. And I actually, you see lots of research or lots of Facebook things happening where, this district is allowing their kids to play, 40% more time, and they're getting great results. And we kind of took that away for some reason. And so we did identify, Brian actually came to me and said he would like to do this. And I said, as long as there's a plan, let's try it. We kind of opened the door a little bit for other campuses maybe to tag along, but they had to have a plan. And so I think that they're seeing some great results, and I asked them to come report out on that today.
So like Dr. Fay said, we were kind of challenged with the idea of doing some research and figuring out how to bring social play back into our kindergarten classes. And we wanted to do it in a way that was responsible to the academic learning, of the kindergarten students, as well as meet their social needs. So we really dove into the research, and we want to show you a little bit about what we learned through the research, and also how we implemented that into our kindergarten classes. So we recognized the need for this, and we really, nothing that we did was shooting from the hip. Everything we did was really research-based. And in a nutshell, what the research says is that if we give kids opportunities to socialize and to learn through play, they're going to benefit academically and socially later in life.
When we started reading the executive function, especially for me, being a teacher, executive function, I was like, what is that? That's all big college words, and I felt I was going back to college doing all these, going through all these journals. And basically, executive function is just a set of mental skills that help you get things done. And it's kind of almost like common sense. Like, I wish I would have known this. I wish I would have had this opportunity when I was growing up. Because these skills actually help kids multitask, avoid impulsive behavior. Again, I wish I would have known that. Adjust to change, keep trying after initial failure, and organization. That's what the executive function is, and that kind of ties into everything.
So these are skills that kids are going to learn in kindergarten, and they apply to the entire rest of life. So it's interesting, the more we dug into it, you find out that kids aren't born with these skills, but every kid is born with the potential to develop them. And like I said before, they develop them when they're playing with other kids. They develop them through consistency. They develop them through social interactions. Interestingly enough, if a kiddo doesn't have that consistency, maybe at home, or a type of environment that develops it, it can actually hurt their development. And so if we're not providing that at school, and maybe they're not getting all they could at home, you actually have kids who are developmentally delayed.
And nowadays, these are the exact skills that these big business corporations are actually looking for, and unfortunately, we lack them. So we did the research, and yes, like I said, we started getting into all these big words. So I felt I needed help, and lo and behold, I had already communication with Pre-K 4SA, and we were just blessed that I just reached out, I mentioned it to them, and they're like, oh my God, it's like, can we help? It's like, of course. So we put our heads together, we collaborated, we developed a plan, and then we began this initiative in this past January.
We worked really closely with Pre-K 4SA, and they made a believer out of me. They're a great organization. They're free, and they're very, very competent. They have some great people over there.
We pay
Yeah, not really free, but
We're definitely taking advantage of that.
in this world is free.
Right.
Yeah, they're not free.
Yeah, well, for this purpose, they.
I think we get more than we give.
So what we did is then what we came up with, instead of like we kind of that impulsive behavior, we kind of come up with a plan, let's do it. Instead, when we introduced this plan to our teachers was, hey, you know what? We're going to break it down chunk by chunk. So 1 week, we're going to teach you one simple little thing, and then the next week, we're going to do a follow-up, which is proper coaching, do a follow-up, and then actually go into your classrooms to see it implemented, and we would help if it needed help. And then that same week, when we were coaching and we were doing those walkthroughs, they would be taught on something else. So it would just be little baby steps, and that was the plan.
Yeah, I mean, we were telling teachers midway through the year that they were going to change what they're doing in the classroom. And so we didn't hold them accountable for anything that they were doing unless we had already trained them on it. So it worked out well. So what does social play look like in the classroom, and how is it integrated into content areas? Social play is really students working together in small groups, and they work together in small groups all day long. A teacher can assign different small groups for every different subject area, so kids aren't necessarily working with the same small group of kids all day, but they constantly have opportunities to talk to each other, to work on projects together, to complete assignments together. They're not working in isolation. They're encouraged to use academic vocabulary all day long. They're using this academic vocabulary. And then manipulatives. All day long, kids have things in their hands. I'll give you an example. We'll see a little bit later. But like in math class, Kids will reach into a bucket and pull out a domino. They'll count the number of dots on one side of the domino, write that number down, count the number on the other side, write that number down, and then subtract the two. They're never doing a worksheet full of subtraction problems. That's gone. They're always doing things with their hands, and there's a reason that they're doing that. The advantages of small groups, I don't have to sell you guys on that. I mean, it helps build relationships. That's been well documented. It enables the teacher to give interventions throughout the day in those small groups. Again, it offers opportunities for social development. Kids are always talking together. They're always interacting with each other. And also, it increases their exposure to differentiated material. It's a lot easier for a teacher to develop 3 different activities at one center and then organize their kids, maybe a low group, a medium group, and a high group. Each group gets a different activity or a different type of activity, and it's differentiated that way.
Now, what we came up with was the kinder schedule. And again, working with Pre-K4SA, I got introduced to something I had never heard before, which was high and low. Research shows that our brains automatically take, after 10 minutes, that's why we have 10 minutes to talk to you. After 10 minutes, our brain takes a break. Without knowing, without wanting to, our brain just shifts. And the other thing that they pointed out was that just as humans, we like that high and low. So there we have to have an activity that's high intensity and then something that's kind of low, relaxed, and then again, hit it to where you just have several breaks. So when sitting down with Pre-K4SA and actually coming up with a kinder schedule, we had to make sure that those breaks were in there and that high and low wave was carried throughout the whole entire day, the kinder schedule.
And one of the things I wanted, it's important to me as the principal, are we following the district guidelines as well? Are we spending enough time on reading? Are we spending enough time on math? And we follow all the district guidelines while at the same time being able to implement this.
So then we focused on math. Our first one was math. Again, not necessarily doing whole group instruction, but doing small. Yes, we have that necessity as teachers especially that we want to teach to the whole group. But mind you, the shift was that lesson or that whole large group instruction would be focused only for 10 to 15 minutes, no more than 15. But yet the true teacher lesson was not going to be taught whole group, but yet small group. And so as the kids rotated, the teacher herself would be giving that instruction while the other kids would then be either at an independent, we called it independent station, which would be the time that they would practice a skill or the lesson that they were taught the day before. And then another one that would be active engagement, which would be games and make learning fun. So they say pictures speak 1,000 words. So we decided to put, we're constantly now we're walking around and looking, and one of the things in these two was, one of the ones, the activities that Mr. Canales had mentioned was the dominoes. So it was just, and the kids knowing, when you walk in and you actually hear them actually mention, oh, the sum, the total, it's like, oh, wow, for them to be using those words. And for them to actually then, the one that you see where they're laying down, that was non-standard unit of measurement that the kids had to actually lay on the floor and see how many, and they would have to pick. That group of kids actually chose cubes. And then the other thing that we're going to constantly be mentioning, if you see the face, especially not necessarily the kids laughing and smiling, but even the teachers. We noticed that the teachers were always started walking around with smiles on their faces, and actually, like I said, the day tended to kind of go faster for them.
So some of the benefits that we saw from doing math this way in the small groups was just increased engagement. The kids are always doing hands-on activities, they're always working with each other. And then again, it's one thing to teach a kid academic vocabulary. It's very different when the student's constantly using academic vocabulary with their peers all day long. So they own those words. And then focused instruction, which again is like differentiation.
they say that reading is the key that opens doors. Well, what do you need? Any teacher will tell you, you need phonics, letter sound translation, vocabulary. But one of the things that we kind of, not necessarily not focus on, but we kind of don't have time for, we kind of get involved with all the phonics and the vocabulary and stuff, that knowledge of the world. And that was a big aha for me this time when we were focusing on our reading. Because how do you give the child that knowledge of the world? As educators, I think it is up to us to give that exposure and that experience to those kids. And how the only way to do it would be through reading. Content would be our reading, and us trying to come up with different ways to give them that exposure. Same type, we kind of kept it simple, same type of framework in everything. It's that you have small group, so the lessons would be done in small group lesson, giving the teacher that opportunity, and also give them that instant chance that as soon as you have a small group, the teacher can easily spot. You know how the child has that stare like, I don't get it. Whereas if it's a small group, you can easily point them out, kind of do that, like Mr. Bernard said, that real-time intervention, kind of correct any misconception and get to it, while the other kids are doing 15-minute rotations throughout literacy groups, which are, again, focusing on their literacy skills.
One of the things I also wanted to point out was that we're teaching writing, it's being integrated with reading. So within the reading block, there's actually a 15-minute section for them to actually practice their writing. So they'll write down some of what they're learning in their reading class, which is kind of the key.
And again, like the pictures say, it's just focused instruction. And yes, we have talked about, I know you see in that one picture where the little kids are actually practicing, and yes, research says that that's kind of, what do they call it, depersonalized writing. And they kind of zone away from you kind of just copying the writing part. However, it also shows that in kinder, they don't have those motor skills to hold the pencil correctly and develop. So mind you, there's confidence boost. It's like, oh, they're copying something and they're writing, and even though they can't come up with it, they at least have some type of stems that they can actually, have and call it their own.
So again, some of the benefits we see in reading is development of oral literacy. Oral literacy is a big key. Oral literacy is the foundation to good writing. So at the kindergarten level, not every kid can write. Not every kid can write a word, let alone a sentence. So what you do is you start with the development of that oral literacy. They organize thoughts in their heads, and they're able to speak that. And so that's huge. As they get better and better at that, then they organize those thoughts in their head and they're actually able to write it down. And so we reward kids for being able to organize those thoughts and then talk about it. So also, again, the development of academic vocabulary. Academic vocabulary, and coming from the secondary level, I know it's such a big deal. So if we can get them started with academic vocabulary now, it just pays off big dividends later.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in just real quick because I know we're running out of time. One of the trainings that we did last year for all admin was the SIDELITS training, and we're going to be requiring that for all brand new teachers to the district moving on, and then we'll have a PD plan to train 100% of all Southwest ISD staff, and the training is called Talk, Read, Talk, Write, and so it's a framework using STEM sentences and things like that, so kids can actually have oral conversations about academic content. And it's funny because we're going to have to teach them how to do that at 9th grade, but yet we know that that's important when we're looking at this particular piece. And so it all fits together in that oral language development. So we're excited about it.
Any 4th or 7th grade teacher will tell you that when you put a prompt in front of a student, the first thing they're going to say is, well, I don't know what to write. And so developing this oral literacy should help that out a lot. They will know what to write. They'll be able to organize thoughts in their head and put them down on paper.
So what we also now are adding to, we're kind of, we have the pre-writing, the 5 stages of writing for like 4 minutes. However, for kinder though, it's amazing when we walk in there, and it's cute how that one has to the rescue. Like I was just thinking, the kid actually, the child actually put phonetic, to the rescue, and they spelled it out. And what the teachers are also now doing is that if you see in the central one, they are having those conversations with the children. It's like, okay, well, what do you like to write about? What do you, and the kids will tell them themselves, oh, well, we like Pokemon. So that first part, or that middle picture, the teacher actually provided a list that actually just, you know, names, hard names, and I could probably not even spell the Pokemon names. But she provided that as a center, giving the child that opportunity for them to write. The other thing that I kind of need to share, and I put it on there, because when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like everything put together. If you see that last one, the cake, candy, and cookies, we walked in, and there was a little boy with a little clipboard. And what he was doing was that he was going to each child and asking, and I'm like, what do you like? You like candy, cake, or cookies? Oh, you like cake? Okay, well, how do you spell your name? Spell it for me. And then he was actually writing it. So for him to actually, you know, organize, do a survey, put it all together, and put all of that together.
chart.
I mean, you see it, and it's working. The other cute one was a map. They were doing math skills for a social studies center, and the child was actually doing the key answer for the map.
So again, benefits, you know, the writing's not forced. We want them to enjoy writing. We want them to enjoy expressing themselves. It's really cool when you see a kindergartner that maybe for the first time in their life was able to organize a thought, put it on paper, and share it with someone else. That's huge, you know, and that's what they're able to do. And we just want it to foster creativity. Again, oral literacy, we want to develop that as much as possible. And then we include writing in all of the content areas. It's not just writing in writing for writing's sake. They can write about what they're reading. They can write about something they even learned in math.
And I'm going to piggyback because we just did this recently and I didn't have time to put it on there. Ms. Bernards and I, we went into a bilingual classroom. And the little girl, I think it's in one of the other centers, and it's a center part that goes to do with writing. And she put, la flor está bonita y huele está hermosa y huele bonita. And Mr. Penard's asked, and mind you, a kindergartner, putting all of those words together in a sentence. And Mr. Penard's looked, then everyone's all like, I'm sorry, can you tell me what that says? And she read it in Spanish, and then he's playing devil's advocate, and he's all like, well, what does that mean? And the little girl looked at it, looking like, oh, what, you can't tell? And she's all like, it says, the flower is pretty and smells beautiful. It's like, wow, for a kindergartner to do that. It speaks volumes.
So she was able to put together a sentence in Spanish and translate it for me in English. That was better than what I can do. So that was pretty cool. I told her that too. I said, you know something I don't.
And then the other thing, again, keeping in mind that high and low. Outdoor education, and I know when we first introduced it to the teachers are like, what is outdoor education? Basically, it's a team-oriented approach. Research shows that outdoor learning decreases stress levels in students and in teachers. It's breath of fresh air. And what was funny was that when we first started doing this, Mr. Penards and I would go out there, the kids were getting tired themselves. They were taking time out, and we thought the teachers had pulled them out to the side, and the teachers were like, no, they're tired. They wanted to sit to the side. And that says a lot.
So the biggest thing for me for outdoor education is that relationship building. It forces kids to follow instructions and learn team building skills. They have to work together out there. And if they don't follow the instructions, everyone in the class kind of sees that. So there's that accountability in a group.
And so when we created the centers, if you saw the schedule, the teachers have a big chunk to where it's just center times. Centers, it's a vast opportunity for them to construct knowledge through hands-on exploration and with interactions with other students. And as well, it helps. It helps the teachers for that instant, hey, the children, they think they're playing in the centers, and now you could be a science part of the lesson that you didn't get to finish. It could be something from reading or something from math. But at the same time, the kids think that they're reading, and the teacher is pulling those small group interventions and focusing on the kids that might need that extra reading portion. And again, these are just examples the centers look. Children need time to think and manipulate with the materials, and when this happens, deeper learning occurs at this time.
So they're working with their hands. Like I said, earlier, they're building things with blocks. I mean, that's the foundations of engineering and science. They're using those little stamps to stamp words into Play-Doh. One of the cutest things you'll ever see is a kid who doesn't necessarily like to read to himself will bring in a stuffed animal and will read the story to the stuffed animal. It just engages them more. It gets them interested in it, and it's pretty cool. Again, the students are just really engaged in their learning, and it gives them a sense of intrinsic motivation to want to learn themselves, learn everything for themselves.
And for centers, it also provides that scaffolding. It gives that teacher that opportunity. And it's cute because some teachers will also just put the name of the child on some of the papers, and the children actually know, like they'll know, like, because I would go up to them, why aren't you doing what you're saying? Saying, I can't do that, but I can do this. This is my paper. And the child knows, hey, what he can do and what he cannot do.
So, we're going to skip ahead just a little bit here. Basically, what we've done is basically a shift in thinking. When kids get the right opportunities to develop those social skills, what we're seeing in the classroom, what the kindergarten teachers are seeing, is that they excel academically. So that's going to benefit the school district. That's going to benefit the kid later in life, and it's going to benefit us as these kids go higher and higher into their grades. So, did you guys have any questions for us?
Looks good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Happy kids. Happy kids, happy adults.
Happy kids, yeah. Every teacher all the kindergarten teachers, there were some that weren't necessarily real excited about having to change what they do.
Yeah.
But every one of them, they're sold on this. They love it. We could try and see.
Can we have a meeting outside?
Yeah, we could play hot potato outside or something. All right, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Good job, good day.
Thank you.
All right, one more things you got?
Yes, sir. All of you are invited to Palo Alto College at 4:30 p.m. today. I believe that the high school party will be out there. It's at the Concho Gallery, which is right next to the theater. We have that opportunity. This Friday at 7 p.m. is the
Good for life. Yeah, we have it. Yes, and just board, we have a tent and we're selling waters, Takis, and hot Cheetos. So donations would be appreciated.
When do you want the donation? Just that?
Friday.
And how about ice chest? Do you have ice chest? for the waters?
Bring an ice chest. I have an ice chest, but it's a small one. So maybe a couple of ice
Bring the
chests.
ice chest with the already iced down the water.
No, you can just bring the cases and then we'll put them together there.
Well, who's
Joaquin,
bringing the ice?
Joaquin will bring the ice.
You sure? It's probably just easier for us to bring ice chests.
You
of
think
water.
so? If you want to. Okay, I don't want to deter anyone. If you want to just bring the cases, bring the cases. If you want to bring it prepped and nice, that would be fantastic.
And this Friday, we are recognizing the Southwest IP Elementary Teacher of the Year, Mr. Ana Pardia, Merrill Creek Elementary at City University at 4:30 p.m. And some of us will be at that event, and there's possibly as well. But that's all. One more thing, it's a great week. It's a great sort of April, and we look for a great remainder of the year. Thank you, Keith. Keith on we got here last Friday, and we got to visit the Kraus House, the San McCullough Cemetery, and it was a really great experience. So thank you for
No, thank you.
Any other comments?
Did you want to